Hi, it's Carl with Agent Branding and Marketing, and I am here with Mike Hanson, State Farm agent from Caldwell, Idaho, and have asked him to just do a case study with me here and talk a little bit about his business and just some of the changes he's seen throughout his tenure of business. And one of the great things about Mike, and he's going to focus on this a little bit more, is how inbound marketing has really been a game changer for him. So, Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And if you would, just kind of start us off, a little history about your agency, how long you've been in business, what brought you to the industry, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, we appointed or started back in June 1st of 2018. Really, what prompted the entrance into this agency? I mean, I started when I was 55 years old, so a little older on the starting on this, but the reason why is because I knew I wanted to develop a residual income that would last a lifetime, and this seemed like a great option for that, a great way to go. And so what I did was, I interviewed with several different companies, and at the end of the day, decided State Farm was a good fit for me. And of course, started out with with team members and being an external candidate. It was a lot to learn. I had been in the insurance industry for life and health about 30 years ago, but the whole P&C side of things was new to me. So naturally, you've got a lot of what you're coached to do is to take action and call internet leads, and all of your marketing is outbound. Caldwell, to give a little background on Caldwell. Caldwell is about 30 miles outside of Boise, in the western side of Idaho. A town of about 65,000 people, so not a huge town. I mean, we're able to draw from areas around in the county we're in. Probably a couple 100,000 people in the county we're in. But again, not huge. But you spend a lot of money on marketing. You can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on internet leads, and we actually had a pretty good conversion ratio, better than most, I think. Probably around we kind of developed our process, but initially didn't have the process in place. But probably about a 9 or 10% conversion ratio on those internet leads, and I think that's the average. I think is around 3.7, so not bad. And there was an ROI, but it's hard to factor in all of the other things that you're doing, calling customers that are upset or people that are upset because they went out online and they filled out a form, and now they've got 10 or 20 different agents calling them, and they say they're only going to sell that lead to three agents. We all know that's a lie. They sell it to a lot more than that. And so by the time, even if you get on it right as soon as that lead hits you, the people they're just mad, and they're upset because they're getting so many phone calls, and they're just getting a barrage from several different people. You still are able to close some of those people, but it's not a great experience for the team members that are making those phone calls, because nobody likes to have people get mad at them. But we had a process, and it was working, and there was a positive ROI, and it was helping build our book of business. But I always felt like that there had to be a better way out there. So we used the standard subsidized company for our SEM. I wasn't doing SEO at the time, but the pay-per-click, and that winds up helping you look just like everybody else. But there were also a lot of things that I knew that from past experience in marketing and advertising industry, that there were things that they weren't doing, but at the time had too many irons in the fire to figure that out. So now we're in our 5th year, and what prompted me to make that switch over to ABM is I actually was just looking for somebody that would help us look different, knowing that the company that State Farm subsidizes will also only serve up one State Farm agent at a time, and and also recognizing the fact that I compete with those guys. We're all part of State Farm, but I compete with other State Farm agents the same way that I compete with any other competitor from any other company. So then the question is, so how do I set myself apart? How also do I go about looking for other search terms besides State Farm? State Farm spends a lot of money advertising nationally, and that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's helping me out. And so I happened to get on a Facebook group of State Farm agents and just ask the question, hey, who does everybody use? And I got, the other standard options of other companies that I knew a lot of State Farm agents used, but that just seemed like it was going from one problem to the same problem. But I had one agent reach out and say, here's my alias, give me a call, I've got somebody for you. And, lo and behold, that's how I ended up with you guys. And boy, I'll tell you what, it has been an absolute game changer. When I say that, please understand, this is not a paid advertisement. This is reality. And it was a total game changer for our agency, and it's just gotten better and better as we've moved along.
Excellent. Yeah. So let's dive into that for just a minute. You brought out the thing of really needing to create a unique looking brand. When you're a captive agent, everybody's using plug and play systems, and all they do is change out the headshot and the name, and so there's nothing that sets you apart. So as you've been through this journey, obviously you've seen the importance of that. You've got to zig when everybody else zags, and I've certainly seen that watching you in particular. So let's talk about you partnered with us, and what have been some of the changes that you've really seen happen? What's taken, you said it's been a game changer for your agency. So kind of give us the where you were at halftime, and when you came back out of the locker room with the new strategy, what's really taken place for you?
Well, there was a couple of things. So we started out with a pretty modest budget, basically spending what I had been spending with the other folks, just to see how things went. And we started seeing some traction. We started with actually started with SEO with you guys, because my contract wasn't finished with the other folks yet. So we started with SEO, and then we transitioned a few months later to SEM, and then all the questions I had was, okay, well, how do I maximize Yelp? How do I look at everything that I'm doing, and how am I being perceived out there in the marketplace? And is it consistent? And am I showing up on Apple Maps when somebody looks? Do I show up there? The business listings out there. All of these things were with the previous folks had kind of started one place, and they kind of did one thing. It was a one-trick pony thing, and then they never looked at it again. And I knew that there were still gaps in what we were doing. So you guys did a great job of looking at everywhere that I was online, whether it was LinkedIn, but doesn't matter what social media, doesn't matter where I was at. You guys were able to go through and make sure that my listings were the same everywhere. And I never realized how important that was, and how diversified that was prior to coming to you, to have you guys actually put that together. So the name of the agency, everything was out there consistently, which I understand now is extremely important for Google, because that's how you tie everything back to you. So then we jumped into the pay-per-click space, and we had, like I said, we started out with a budget, and I was able to increase that budget every month. So what started happening was, let me back up. So my goal in doing this was, I knew that I wanted to drive more traffic inbound, and if I did that, then my team would be happier to take those leads and do what they do best, which is pivot and bundle and do all the things that they know how to do. but they would do it with people that had come to us and were genuinely looking for another option. And in our market, State Farm's extremely competitive, and I think they are in a lot of markets throughout the country. But I just knew I just had to find a better way to get the message out there. And by having us, so the first thing I looked at is when you and I first spoke, is I said, well, what I want to do is I want every time an ad pops up for anybody, doesn't matter whether it's the State Farm agent down the street or the Allstate agent, it didn't matter what my competitors were. I wanted to make sure that my ad was coming up, and so that I knew that they were seeing that. So that actually kind of created a problem. Well, a good kind of problem, but a problem nonetheless. And that was that we started getting phone calls for other State Farm agents. Or, hey, are you guys, do you know that your number's listed for so-and-so's office? And I took one of those calls personally and said, are you sure? Look at your computer again. Oh no, I'm sorry, you're wrong. You're right. I called you because your ad was the first one to pull up, but I was trying to get a hold of so-and-so. And so we would just kindly transfer them over. We even had a guy call in, got through the entire process of onboarding him, and then he suddenly realized, oh, I'm not talking to Geico. I owed them money. Oh, you mean I don't have to pay that? And so we converted him from being a Geico customer to a State Farm customer. Not only did we save him money, but we got the phone call because he thought he was calling Geico, but he was actually calling our State Farm office. And that was not an isolated incident. That happened more times than I can count. And all of these people driving those phone calls into our office. And now we're at a point where we are 100% inbound, 100%. And I mean, we have to follow up on a lot of the leads that come in, but that's a lot better because they requested a quote from us, not from xyzcheapinsurance.com. So they don't get called by everybody. They got a hold of us. As a matter of fact, this morning I was just talking to one of my team members, and he'd closed somebody this morning, and he'd just followed up after the long weekend. And they said, "Oh man, I forgot. I'm so glad you called. I'd forgotten that I'd asked you guys for a quote." And we were able to bundle them together, 2 cars and a home, average customer, boom, done. They're squared away. They were so happy to hear from us because they had requested the quote. It wasn't, I don't remember ever filling that out. I mean, how many times does that happen on an internet lead where they're like, I didn't fill that out. I don't remember ever filling anything out, because they don't want to admit that they stupidly filled out a form that caused an entire 3 or 4 or 5 day period of nothing but harassing phone calls and chaos. They've just unleashed that on themselves, or they didn't remember filling it out, or whatever the case was. I'm convinced those folks also recycle leads like there's no tomorrow. I don't know that that you're getting fresh leads when you do that. But here, these people are calling into us, so our conversion ratio has gone from 9% is probably pretty generous with the internet leads, but it was somewhere around 9%. Our conversion ratio now is over 30%.
Good.
That is a significant increase. And when you start attaching ROI to what you're doing, which I did after our conversation the other day, and figuring out that we're paying about $10 a lead, which if it's unsubsidized, that's about what you would pay through an internet lead company, only to be caught in that trap. Where here, these folks are looking for that, so we're not sending out quotes, generating quotes, and mailing quotes. And so our process was to make a phone call, email the quote, text the quote, snail mail the quote. So I've got several different people in the office. I've got several different people involved in that process on an iLead. Excuse me, not to mention the cost of postage, the cost to actually write a handwritten note on the front of that quote to send it out and hope for the best. And that process worked, but I didn't take into account all of the expenses on that and the time it takes to do that. Where with this, we follow that same process, but the conversion ratio is so much higher. When I looked at the ROI, and I started looking at ROI over a 2-year period of time, because that's how long, because the majority of the customers we're getting in are mutual customers, not standard customers, which is another huge Huge benefit to us because those customers are pretty sticky. They stay with State Farm for a long time. We're tough to beat if you're a mutual customer because there's so many different discounts. So when you look at the ROI over a 2-year period of time, it's ridiculous. When you're talking about the conversion ratio, $10 per lead, how much money that means to the agency over the period of time, it is fantastic. So now we've gone from hoping to write 30 or 40 apps a month as an office to consistently writing 130 to 150 apps a month. And now this year, my goal, or next year in 2023, my goal is to get to that 200 app a month point. That's the next step for us. Our high month was about 180, but on average, we're between 130 to 150 a month. And a lot of changes we made at the beginning of this year took some time for us to get to that point where we got to that probably took 6 months for us to get traction on this, wouldn't you say?
I'd say so. Yeah.
But you told me that. You said, hey, it's going to take a while if you want to continue on. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's costing me very little for us because I didn't have to pay for all of the leads that were coming in. We weren't getting that many leads, so it wasn't costing me anything. Let's just go ahead and let this thing run. You guys were great to work with me on that. And so finally, when it starts to run, holy cow, just shut up and get out of the way and write the business, because that's exactly what happens. I had a fellow agent that I've known long before we both became State Farm agents. He consistently asked me every month, well, how are you? Because a report comes out where they show how many leads, statefarm.com leads we got. So, well, how are you doing that every month? And I said, well, I mean, let's back up just a little bit. First of all, I have no idea what their criteria is that they're using. But I can tell you what I know, and what I know is the majority of those leads are not coming from something State Farm generated. They're coming from things that I generated through my pay-per-click campaign, not that they did, and that's fine. But I spend quite a bit of money. My budget's probably 4 times what most agents spend, and in the pay-per-click space, it's still not that much because I sold pay-per-click years ago. So I know what the average spend was. Going into 2023, my goal is to double that because I want to get more. I want to capture more of that business, and we've got to. What you're doing is absolutely, no doubt, it works. And if you're another agent and you're looking at doing this, I'm telling you, it is phenomenal. Carl and the team are great about finding what works and keep on tweaking the system until it does what you want it to do, and it's worth every penny.
Fantastic. Well, a couple of things that we'll talk through and just wrap up here. You said a couple of things that I think are critical for any agent watching this. Pay-per-click's only magic if your follow-up works. And
yes,
one of the things that I certainly appreciate about your office, you guys understand the follow-up. Just what you said about the Geico lead. You and I had this conversation before that I had listened to calls before where, somebody would call into an agent's office and, oh, this isn't Geico. And they said, nope, not Geico, bye. And not even take the time to ask, looking for an auto quote, why are you even calling? And so I think that's one of the things that I know you do extremely well, but you also brought up the other piece, and that is when it comes to inbound marketing, you can't just dip your toe in the water. You really do have to make a commitment to it. That's something you've done in your office, and you're seeing the rewards for that. And so, those golden nuggets, I think any agent can pull out of this conversation. The other question I want to end with is just this, Mike. If there was an agent out there picking your brain saying, Mike, I want to knock it out of the park, what would be maybe your top 2 or 3 things that you would say, this is things you've really got to put in place to make that happen?
Well, I think you brought it up. I mean, we've got a 12 contact process that we have that I personally jumped in and figured out. This team didn't figure that out. I realized that I was the one that had to lead the way, and I had to figure out how we were going to do this, what worked, what didn't work, tweak it. I spent probably 6 months making outbound calls myself on iLeads so I could figure out what our process was going to be, and then I established what that process was. And if you look at there's I think a Harvard Business School study that talked about the number of contacts it takes to actually close somebody, and the number is around 7 or 8. And and I've got a copy of that, I'd be happy to share, but it's around 7 or 8 contacts, but the average salesperson actually only reaches out 2 times. So you've not followed up. So your point's great. So we have a 12 contact process. Like I said, we make a phone call, we email, we text, with these leads, we still do that, and then we hard copy mail out a quote. And so they're getting this 3 different ways. The text thing, now that we're able to attach quotes on text, which wasn't previously the case up until about a year or so ago, has made a huge difference. So I would say make sure that you've got your follow-up process in place. Make sure your team knows how to pivot to that. Well, so what has you shopping for insurance today? I mean, all the things that every sales leader across or every salesperson knows that you need to do. You need to make sure your team's doing that, because had they not, you're right. Had they not been shifting that to, well, let me get a little information from you. What are you paying right now? And we've got a form that we have the folks that are answering the phone fill out, and then they give it to a salesperson to follow up, or they transfer the call over depending on the situation. And I think you just have to figure out that there's a process for everything you do, and then you have to follow that process religiously. And part of the reason why this worked was because one of the sales guys that have been with me from the very beginning, when I said, okay, here's what I need you to do. I need you to take care of service. I'm going to take care of sales. And it was just he and I, just the 2 of us. That's all that was. He was the last man standing from the original hiring crew. So it was just he and I knew that we needed to do something different. So I figured out what our process was for this. Then he saw that working, and he had absolute buy-in and was chomping at the bit to get back into sales. So as soon as we replaced him in service and put him back into sales, he had 100% buy-in. He knew this thing worked because he saw me writing business like there was no tomorrow. So he saw that, so he had the buy-in, so he knew the process worked. So now, fast forward to now, we have all the inbound, and now he left for about a year. Now he's back with me, and he's following up on. He's doing 100% follow up on the leads, just the inbound leads that we get from people requesting a quote, or they started a quote on our landing page. However they came to us, he's doing all the follow up on those, and so now he's doing that. And his first month back was September. And he wrote 57 apps in September. I think he was like probably 40 or 50 apps in October, and he'll be 40 or 50 apps this month. And that's all business we weren't getting because I didn't have time before he came back to follow up on those leads. I would do a little bit, but I wouldn't get to the 12th contact. And he follows that process religiously. So that's what I would say. Those are the things I would say make all the difference in the world. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. What works for me, what works for our office may not work for you as far as the process goes. That's why I say you have to find out what your process is, because different markets are different, people are different, every agency is different, but you have to find out what works for you and then just beat that thing to death.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Mike, I appreciate you doing this case study with us, and appreciate your time today. It's been great working with you. And obviously, you've got some big goals for 2023 you and I talked about. And
Yep.
So that's our objective this year, to knock it out of the park.
Absolutely, and I have every confidence that that's exactly what we're going to do to get to that 200 apps a month, and to add it. This year we added $1 million onto our book of business. Next year I want to add the same thing, and I just want to add $1 million on every year going forward. And I know that with our partnership, that's going to happen.
Fantastic.